Hello and welcome back to the channel. In this episode, we're going to talk about working with multiple Sparx instances or projects open at one time. And I want to ask you, do you only have one instance open at a time? How do you deal with reuse? Let us know down in the comments below. I very rarely just have one Sparx project open. I have my asset management, my knowledge management. I might have a project that is working on a release and another project working on a new release, all open with a handful or dozens of modelers and stakeholders working together at one time. So it's up to you on how you want to take advantage of Sparx as a thick client desktop tool over a SQL database, or you want to share that data as you're working together to deliver whatever your objectives are. We're going to go through 10 practices. I certainly have many more, but the top 10 I most commonly used in this episode. So let's get started. The shop or company that you work with or for should have a common project structure. This promotes faster acclimation for all stakeholders. While TOGAF provides a common standard or structure based on the ADM or the architecture development method, there are alternate structures. A simple and best practice for folder layout is project management, leading into requirements management, leading into functional requirements, non-functional requirements, user stories, and requirements. Then we get into the solution, and the solution, or the who does the what, where the what is the requirements, contains the solution overview, the architecture options that are available, the chosen solution based on the best option, trade-off analysis. Then we get into the design, or the how to the what. And this contains the models relevant to the solution analysis and the agreement between the development department and others that are helping in the design leading into whatever the development is. And these models may be architectural diagram, sequence diagram or diagrams, and the database decisions. Then we get to test, and this is the will to the what, basically validating that the how has been agreed on, the test plan has been laid out, and the test cases are all validated along with the test data in order to understand and commit to the will to the what upon release. And the release is the done for the what. In some agile methodologies, we use the term done and done, but simply put, the done for the project. This contains your release notes, your deployment guide, user manuals, of course, training manuals as well, and where your version history will be maintained. A good practice is to make a Sparx template that can be reused, and it already comes in configured and set up the way that you want to start a particular project. You may have multiple templates for multiple purposes, very short sprints, medium-sized projects, large projects, or even bug fixes. So it already comes in with a cover page. It's already organized in your folder structure. It already provides access to other things that are very important for understanding how to deliver any particular effort based on the processes, practices that you have. Another best practice for projects, big or small, is having a common landing page. So this would be set, as you've learned in the channel, in the Collaborate panel. You'd go to Model Diagrams, Manage, and you would set your cover page as your default landing page. This promotes ease of access and navigation. This is a critical practice that makes entering new projects far simpler to get started. Stakeholders only need to follow common navigation to understand how to move through models as well as support other practices. to get going in their roles and responsibilities as they are assigned. The next common practice is number 3, and that's common reference data. So every project, and should be accessible from the cover page, accesses a repository. This is a network share. This could be reusable asset service, or it could be a version control platform that contains your document management. But being able to get to reference data that's common across your projects provides common reporting templates, images, UML templates, patterns, and much more. Make sure you're using common terms and glossaries as part of your reference data across your projects. Do not replace used terms unless approved by the governance, your governance, and that applies to all reference data that's commonly used across your projects. The next practice is number 4, and that's common templates. Make sure that you're using common templates, especially reporting templates within your project or other delivery. Reporting templates, very important that they're configured. They may be part of your reference data import, or they could be XML, XMI imports, but ensure that you're using common templates with your logos and everything provided across your project so that there is consistency. Practice number 5 is to reduce duplication. So in the asset repository, this is where we manage glossary terms, and we can export these and then replace GUIDs, or we can use the library in order to share particular resources that are necessary for other projects. So in this particular case, we're bringing in glossary terms into the library, which then can be shared with other projects necessary to reuse those glossary terms. Now, a special note is that these terms have their own global unique IDs. So when they're being used or incorporated in another project, they're not being duplicated in management terms. In other words, they're managed here, but they're not managed where they're brought into in another project. The same thing applies to all elements. In this particular case, we're using building blocks, architectural assets, if you will. They're being managed in the asset repository and then later reused in other projects. So these are the original global unique IDs for management, which are not duplicating the management in other open projects. Practice number 6 is the use of libraries. And we've talked about libraries before in the channel. And when you're working on a particular effort, separate from other efforts, and you're brainstorming, you want to be able to bring in assets or other intelligence that can be reused throughout your project. So we're going to target a particular folder, and you're able to bring in your building blocks if necessary. You can bring in your data architecture if necessary, and you can bring in your terms if necessary. Next, we get into practice number 7, and that's the use of patterns. Patterns are mission critical for being able to build out your architecture extremely quickly. You can drag and drop patterns in from your pattern repository that you've created, and you're able to bring in other patterns necessary to drive your delivery, such as use case patterns and storyboard patterns and so much more. So in this particular case, let's bring in some discussion points that we want to use within our architecture. We're just going to drag in a pattern that just simply allows us to very quickly bring in discussion points as we're working through requirements analysis and other objectives in our modeling exercise. The next practice, number 8, is the use of reusable asset service, or RAS. And with RAS, you're able to create a reusable asset service. This is not a file share or source code. You can go into it and you can bring in reference data and a plethora of other intelligence for the purpose of reuse. In this case, we want to bring in some architecture components. We want to validate what architecture we're after before we bring it in. And then as soon as we're ready, we go to our target package. We can bring in our architecture building blocks, all the intelligence for reuse across any project that's necessary to deliver our project objectives. In this case, we are after these class elements for reuse across any project implementation. The next practice is number 9, and that's just plain old asset repository. And if you're not using RAS, it's very critical that you create a common share where you can store assets that others can get to when necessary, whether that's reference data or whether that's architectural data as you need or require when you're building out any project. So have a reusable asset repository on a network share or a source code repository share that others can quickly get to when they need to get reusable assets so that you do not have to reinvent the wheel when delivering your objectives. Saving the best for last, and that's number 10, and that's a knowledge management repository. I normally put it within my asset repository, and having a KMS Sparx project is probably the first thing that you should start when conducting computer-aided software engineering and UML objectives. This will be your process and practice knowledge source. Keep this intelligence in one project instance to make management of knowledge easy to access, share, and manage. All right, we're going to wrap up now. I hope this episode was beneficial for you. As I'd stated, we never have just one project open. We have our primary project that we're working on. We have our asset repository in the background that we can draw knowledge from and other assets for reuse as we're working between different project releases. And it's very important that you understand how to effectively and productively work between your project SQL instances, providing authorized access to your intelligence and managing your model assets and delivery elements across your projects. In our next episode, we're going to talk about using Kanban to manage our metadata. This is going to be a good tie into dealing with multiple projects that are open at one time and how the metadata, that's versions, status, and other metadata that you're working with, other intelligence that you're working with in your delivery. Following the Kanban exercise, we're going to jump back into dealing with large projects. This is different than dealing with multiple projects. You may have very large projects. You want to be aware of performance problems that you might engage or have, depending on your deployment views, how many stakeholders are accessing your models, your model elements and intelligence, and the geography involved in accessing that intelligence, that model information. So I look forward to getting into those episodes with you as we wrap up our modeling practice series. So until that next episode, happy modeling.